I've been sharing space with the other gender since conception. And I'm not just talking about being in my mother's womb. I was born a fraternal twin. And even though most of you had this wonderful luxury of being in your mother's womb all by your lonesome for 9 months, I shared that space as a twosome. Not as much space in between as probably what you had. And, you know, my sister makes a big deal out of being the oldest, and I can admit publicly that I may have assisted her in her exit strategy from my mother's womb. And it was really only because I wanted a few moments to myself, even if only 11 minutes. Now, some might say that I was born to talk about twosomes and to say a little bit about gender. And so what I would like to do today is give you a few ideas and invitations about how you might play better together as a twosome. So what gets in the way of us playing better together as a twosome? I would say one of the biggest things that happens in terms of an obstacle is that we spend too much time up in our head and not enough time in our hearts. Now, what's one way that we do that? We do that oftentimes when we compare. And when we compare in a relationship, it keeps us out of our heads, and it keeps us in our heads and out of our hearts where we really truly desire to be. See, when we compare, we create a hierarchy. Someone's above and someone's below. Comparison creates that, and what that means is someone's superior and someone isn't as much. And whether we're comparing ourselves to our perfect selves, or we're comparing ourselves to somebody else, or we're comparing the relationship to another relationship, that comparison gets us into our heads. Well, there's no intimacy in a hierarchy. You kind of miss each other. So what you have to do is you have to flip that over. And part of what you need to do is flip that over in a way where you begin to see the other as a mystery. And when you see the other as a mystery, you create place for intimacy to happen. Because intimacy happens not in the hierarchy, but in the horizontal. So there's a 13th century mystic and poet named Rumi who has some wisdom about this that I think might be helpful. He says in one of his poems, "The inner nest, not made by instinct, will never be quite round, and each has to enter the nest made by the other imperfect bird." Let me just repeat that for you. The inner nest, not made by instinct, will never be quite round, and each has to enter the nest made by the other imperfect bird. When I approach somebody else as imperfect, it opens the door for me to see them as a mystery. And when I see the other as a mystery, it allows me to hold you as that unfolding mystery that, one, you've always been, and actually that unfolding mystery that you will always be. And in doing so, I can be playfully curious about who you are and who you're becoming. Because you're always becoming something new. And the wonderful thing about mystery is it means that I never figure you out. And therefore, the tool that's most helpful to me is actually curiosity. To be curious about you, and to find out and explore that, and to hold that. Curiosity opens up that possibility for us. So, the place of mystery allows for playful curiosity, where intimacy loves to come and play about. So I invite you to, with your partner, in any twosome that you're in, to see them as a mystery and to hold them in your heart. Not to figure them out or manage them up in your head, but to hold them as a mystery in your heart. we play better together from our hearts. Now, speaking of being playful, what I'd like to do is I'd like to share a different idea with you, one a little bit more gender-based. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to eavesdrop on a conversation. I'm going to be speaking out loud what I'm hearing other people say. I'll give you a clue. It's only one gender that I'm listening to, and they're speaking about a particular topic. You ready? Okay, see how sharp you are this afternoon. I think they could do it anywhere, anytime. I sometimes feel it's the only thing they ever think about. Don't they understand that we're just different when it comes to this? You have an idea what I'm talking about yet? One last clue. I can feel so much pressure that I sometimes just feel myself shutting down. So what's the gender of the audience? And what are they talking about? Sex. So it sounds like women talking about men about sex. But what if I told you that they were men's voices? And that was men talking about sharing feelings. So I have this belief that just as there is a sexual response cycle, that there's an emotional response cycle. And in the same way that in our sexual response cycle, we see that men generally are seen as faster than women, I believe in the emotional response cycle, women are faster than men. They're just ready to go to have that emotional conversation. But let's unpack that just a little bit. See, what we've done in terms of the sexual response cycle is we've done the research and we've had the conversations and we've come to realize that that is just a normalized difference. It's normal that one is faster than the other. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no judgment. And what happens with no judgment? There's no hierarchy. There's nothing to manage or to fix. We just accept the mystery that it's different. Okay, fair enough. I believe that the same is true in the emotional response cycle. My experience of having had thousands of conversations over the last 30 years, primarily with men, is that men are slower to talk about their feelings than women are. And I think one of the most helpful things we could do is kind of normalize that and say that's okay. So here's the good news. The good news is that if you want a mutually satisfying experience, whether it's about the sexual response cycle or the emotional response cycle, the solution is the same. It's foreplay. So what I talk about is emotional foreplay. So emotional foreplay in the relationships between men and women. Now, you might be wildly curious at this moment what emotional foreplay would look like. Let me just give you one quick hint. With the word play in the word foreplay, it's meant to be fun and it's meant to be enjoyed. So, when we're talking about emotional foreplay, if I were to tell you exactly what to do, that would be a little bit overly prescriptive right now. And I think what would happen is you might get caught trying to figure out what you should do differently. And if you start to think about what you're doing differently, you're going to be stuck up in your head trying to make it better, have a more perfect relationship, as opposed to living out of your heart where you can be playful, enjoy the mystery of the other, and know that you don't need that kind of pressure. So what I would invite you to do is have that conversation with your twosome. Whether it be about sexual foreplay or emotional foreplay, how might you co-create a more playful relationship with each other? Now, I believe if you do that, it allows you to live more presently in your heart, where you can be a better twosome. Sometimes people ask me, well, how do I know that if I'm in my heart? Well, actually, there's a really easy way to check. You just put your hand on your heart and see if you're there. Okay? And sometimes you're not, and that's okay. Don't despair. It happens to people. You're probably up in your head, but we can get you back down, okay? All you have to do is take a deep breath, smile, and allow yourself to drop back down into that warm, loving space of play in your heart. Okay? If you can see the other person in your relationship, in your twosome, as a wonderful unfolding mystery, and use curiosity to navigate that space between you and the relationship, and if you are courageous enough to explore what it means to really have fun in the emotional foreplay of your relationship, then I truly believe that you can co-create the passionate twosome that you desire. Thank you.